To paraphrase Hunter S. Thompson, when you get locked into a serious beer collection, the tendency is to push it as far as you can.
Cheers.
Son of a bitch! Give me a drink! One more night! On this camping thing! Son of a bitch! If I drink it clean, I'm gonna drink my life away.
Welcome back to episode 7 of the Tap Takeover podcast. I'm your host, Alex Kuhn, and I'm here with my 3 best drinking buddies,
Andy.
Jim.
Jesus.
and we have a special treat for you guys. But before we get into that, just wanted to say thank you. Thank you so much to all of our listeners. We just passed 2,500 downloads this past week with only 6 episodes. Guys, let's give a cheers to our listeners.
Cheers.
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 That's right.
We'd also like to thank Lakefront Brewing, Milwaukee Brewing Company, Mobcraft, Raised Grain, and most recently, drumroll please, Half Acre Brewing Company, who we just visited this past weekend. Talked with Kelli Playtek, the sales representative, and Matt Young, the head brewer. Guys, what was that like for you?
I think we made it, man. We're on our way. Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun stepping outside of our comfort zone, being here just in Milwaukee, but makes it seem like we can go anywhere.
It was a fantastic experience. A lot of respect and admiration for Half Acre, and they're making tremendously great beers on there in Chicago, and it was really fantastic to see that large of an operation.
I think what was even cooler, it's a large operation, but they still were able to work with us. You know, small guys from Milwaukee, and they were really cool. Can't say enough.
I just think it was a great jump for us into the big pool that is the Chicago brewing market right now. I mean, as Matt said in the interview, there's over 80 breweries that have opened in the Chicagoland area in the past 5 years. And we're just bringing a little bit back to Milwaukee with the Half Acre because they recently started distributing here.
And that's been a really fun tale to tell. A brewery that started contract brewing with Sand Creek here in Wisconsin, and then ventured back to Chicago, started their own deal, and now 10 years later coming back to the state where they very first started. So, Jesus, we've already kind of let the cat out of the bag, but tell us about who's taking over the taps on the Tap Takeover podcast today.
Well, it's going to be Half Acre, and it's going to be 4 different variations of their Big Hugs. We're actually going to start with the Imperial Stout with coffee and vanilla, 10% ABV, so we'll start feeling this pretty quick.
Yeah, and a big shout out to Kelli with an I for graciously donating this beer for us to enjoy tonight.
Actually, you guys were there at the Big Hugs thing, and we touched on that before, but, I mean, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so early December, we were out there for, what was it, Andy, about 3 hours in the cold and the snow?
Yeah, it was the coldest day at our little mini beercation we took. It was the end of the road. It was the last stop before home, and
Yeah, if you happen to listen to our episode 3, Michigan Beercation, you're going to hear a lot of drinking and a lot of fun stories about an epic beer vacation that Andy and I took to Michigan, Indiana, and finally Chicago at Half Acre Brewing.
So you guys were there for 3 hours standing in line. Were there any fun stories of waiting in line? Did you guys do any bottle shares?
We weren't involved in any of the bottle shares. It was kind of the tail end of the weekend for us. Our livers were taking a little bit of a break. We had to drive back to Milwaukee in a snowstorm. So we were kind of taking it easy, but we did see a lot of bottle shares.
the people were opening bottles from the Dark Horse 4 Elf Party. The Winter Warmer, they were opening. The Bourbon Barrel Aged Plead the Fifth.
I think I
6
saw
pairs
one
of legs.
I saw the Burb Rum. Yeah, so they were opening some of those. I did see a Black Note, which we also enjoyed on our episode 3. So there were some big bottles being opened.
So, did you guys try this on tap, Big Hugs there, or was it only available in the bottles?
So the cool part about the Big Hugs release party is Half Acre. These folks really go all out. I mean, you saw how cool everyone we dealt with was at the brewery, and that extends to their release parties. There was in line still. They came out and handed out hand warmers to people. Dark Matter Coffee, who they partner with for Big Hugs, gave free coffee out to people in line. And then when you got inside, you got to taste everything you bought before you even purchased it. And there was also rare one-offs that'll never be around again that they were just sampling.
Yeah, just trying to get some feedback on some ideas that they were maybe doing for next year's Big Hugs. So yeah, there was a lot lot of stuff that you absolutely couldn't get another day of the year. We didn't stay for a full pour, but like Andy said, they were walking around with pitchers, and you had a little tasting glass, and you got to try just about everything that they had. It was really a fun event. They even had little snacks, little snacks. They had a DJ in the rafters. Quite an event.
So you tried this on tap the day of. I'm curious to see what you think, if there's any differences or anything off being in a bottle.
Yeah, I think that's a great opportunity to get into this first beer. So we're going to do all 4 variations. There's the Coffee Imperial Stout Big Hugs. There's the vanilla variation, which is the first one that we're going to try. The barrel-aged version of the Salted Chocolate Espresso Big Hugs, which, in my opinion, was the best one. Andy, did you have a favorite?
That was my favorite, but I think the favorite that I actually tasted there is they had a hazelnut variation of Big Hugs that they actually poured just as samples while we waited in line.
Now, we had tried just previously, in I believe it was episode 3, Hazelnuts from Oddside. I remember you didn't care for that one because you said it was too much hazelnut, but this one you enjoyed.
No, that was me.
Oh, that was you, Jim.
Yeah, I'm not the big hazelnut fan. I'm not really.
That was a long night. I can see how we can confuse each other. Yeah.
So, Jim, I'm going to kick it to you first. What are you picking up on this vanilla variation on the Coffee Imperial Stout Big Hugs?
Yeah, so definitely getting the vanilla on the nose and on the front of the palate. Immediately following that is definitely coffee. They didn't spare any expense on the coffee. And as we'll hear in the interview, they go to great expense and a lot of work to put coffee in to their beers. They don't just throw some coffee grounds in there and hope for the best. And it really shines through in this beer. I'm not normally a big vanilla fan, but I think for this, it comes off really well.
And they actually pointed out that they had kind of drawn back on the vanilla a little bit this year. There may have been some complaints the year before, a little too much vanilla. I think it's kind of subtle. I mean, there's a lot of vanilla in it.
Yeah.
But it's definitely more subtle than some other vanilla variations of Imperial Stouts that I've had. Jesus, what do you think?
No, definitely the vanilla. I think it's still a lot of vanilla. That's just me, and I definitely think it's boozy. I mean, I think it's smoky.
Yeah, it's definitely dry. I mean, it finishes very dry.
Yeah, almost like a wine, kind of.
I think it's just, I agree with Jesus. The vanilla's a bit too much for me. I love the coffee flavor on the back end, but I think the vanilla actually kind of adds to that booziness a little bit for me.
To me, it's just really boozy. I don't know why, but it should be a lot smoother. And I know they, as you will hear in the interview, that they don't want aging or they don't believe in it, but I would actually age this beer just to take that edge off.
The longer it ages, the more the vanilla will fall off.
Yeah, that'll fall off, the booziness will fall off, and I think it'll be a just smoother beer.
So, Andy, you were there at the event with me. You picked up the same allotment that I did, but you actually traded a few of yours, including the vanilla. Do you think that was a good trade on your part, or would you want to take that one back after trying it?
You know, on my part, I'd do it again. I traded both of my vanillas that I got. I traded most of my allotment of Big Hugs because they're in demand. I mean, they literally only had 12 to 15 cases of each of the variations. So they're in such high demand, what I received back was well worth the trade, in my opinion.
And just to recap on the variations, we do have them all, right? All that were available on bottles?
All that were available at the party in bombers, we have.
Okay,
Yep.
excellent.
All right, well, let's get straight into the interview here. I think we've meandered about this first beer. So we will be back after the first portion of the interview. We're going to have some beer news for you, some festival news, 3 more variations on the Big Hugs, and we will see you then. Welcome to the Tap Takeover Podcast Brewery Interview Series. We're here today with a very special episode, sitting down with Half Acre Brewing to discuss everything from beer style conceptions to marketing strategies and label art to new collaborative endeavors. Half Acre began brewing in 2007, doing a contract series through a brewery in Wisconsin, and now 10 years later, they have returned to the state of Wisconsin through a huge market rollout campaign. Already having garnered a cult-like following at their Northside Chicago Brewery taproom facility on Lincoln Avenue, in 2015, Half Acre expanded to their Balmoral facility to expand their ever-increasing production line. And that is where we find ourselves today on the Tap Takeover podcast as we sit down with Head-Brewer Matt Young and brewery sales representative Kelli Playtek to chat about Half Acre Brewing. How are you both doing today?
Doing really good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
It's a real honor to sit down with you guys, and we just wanted to know, first off, what was your introduction to craft brewing for each of you? What was the path that brought you to Half Acre Brewing on Chicago's North Side?
For me, so My introduction to craft brewing was probably having my first craft beer in college, which was Goose Island IPA. And it was just like, I'd never had something so bitter and so disgusting that I wanted another one just to like experience that again, figure out what had just hit me. So I started with that and got into home brewing. Then I got into biology and science of brewing and all that sort of stuff. Took a detour through grad school, which is what led me to Chicago. And then from grad school, I started working here at the brewery. That was seven years ago.
So did you have the opportunity to take any brewing classes in college? Was that even a thing back then?
Actually, it was, yeah. I went to school in Kentucky, and I was in the first class ever at my college of a history and science of brewing and of beer and brewing. And it was, as a senior in college, for this class to get created out of nowhere, right in time for me to get to take it, because I had just turned 21. It was a class where we would learn the history of beer, we'd learn about the science of beer, and then we went through a bunch of different styles and did a homebrew in class of each style. And then when our beers were ready to drink, the teacher brought in commercial examples of the style we brewed, and we got to taste our homebrew alongside the commercial beer. And I was just like, this is great. I'm in college getting an upper level biology credit for this class that I'm taking.
For drinking beer, yeah.
For brewing beer.
Yeah, so you were on your way to a PhD, but you haven't finished that, but you took a big leap in coming in here. How was that experience?
It was amazing. Yeah, so I was in a PhD program, and I decided that I didn't really want any of the jobs that would require me to have that degree anymore. Half Acre tweeted out at the time that they were hiring or looking for a deckhand position at the old brewery, which was it just kind of covered every possible aspect of cleaning and labor that could have gone on at the brewery at the time. So I immediately basically just dropped everything I was doing and sort of forced my way in for an interview, and which was a very informal process at the time. So
you've seen the full journey then, right? Full journey just here at Half Acre.
Almost, yeah.
So that's a pretty low position to come into a brewery. How did you get to be head brewer?
I think just time and commitment and having the interest and the knack for it. Yeah, as we grew, I just sort of took on more responsibilities and found myself in new positions over time.
And Kelli, how about you? How did you find your way to Half Acre?
Well, it all kind of started with New Belgium. I have a lot of friends out in Colorado, and I was always just kind of fascinated with, the mountains. And I didn't really have much attraction towards beer when I was younger, but I had my first fat tire maybe a little bit before 21. I don't like to talk about that, but it was forced upon me, let's say. But after I had my first, amber, my first beer with flavor, it kind of blew me away. And that was actually around the same time that they launched Bombers of Fat Tire in Chicago. So I might be dating myself a little bit here. But that was huge for me, getting any beer that wasn't Busch Light into my system. Really inspired me. And then, I tried for my first beer when I was 21 was New Holland Dragon Milk. And at that time, I was also working at a small pizza place and brewery in Chicago. I was serving tables there. It was a microbrewery. It's called Peace. And that place, I just started working there because I was in college and I needed some money on the side. But at the same time, my brother, who actually lives in Milwaukee, had started brewing for Miller. He started as their pilot brewer, and he was working on like a mirrored 10-barrel system. And so he was getting interested in beer, and I started working at a microbrewery, so just kind of became like a family thing. Every Christmas, we would bring home our new beers, and he would brew beers for me for my birthday, and, it just kind of kept evolving. He got a little bit deeper. Now he manufactures breweries nationally, and I started working at Half Acre after 5 years at that other brewery. And when I started at Half Acre, I was working in the retail store, which a lot of people start out at, because I was the only person of 16 of us at the time that had worked at a bar or restaurant. I opened the tap room. So, everyone wears a lot of hats here. We're still a very small company, and at the time we were much smaller. I've been here about 5.5 years. We did whatever we could to make the brewery run.
How many employees currently?
Around 80, I believe, right?
Sounds about right.
Somewhere somewhere around 80. A lot of taproom people, some event help, but for full-time.
And what's fun about the podcast is we're doing our interview right here in the production facility. So you're going to hear some of those employees. You're going to hear some hooping and hollering and some
apologize
production.
in advance.
No, no.
Oh, no.
We love it.
Part of the charm.
It's Friday afternoon in the breweries.
You know what? I'd be high-fiving my coworkers if I was making this beer too.
Yeah.
Easy.
No, we love hearing the sounds. We love hearing the sounds of an actual brewery in production. And we love the fact that you guys are very much a family kind of brewing. That sort of feeling. Can you guys talk about that? What does it mean to be a part of Half Acre?
Yeah, I think that one of the main focuses that has been with Half Acre for as long as I've been here is a focus on culture and workplace positivity, and just making sure that everyone is really excited about what they're doing here and happy to be here and is taken care of.
I agree with that. When we were doing hiring for the tap room, one of the first things that we would discuss about the new hires was, could we go on vacation with this person?
Nice.
Do you have good vibes? Do you feel like you can spend multiple days in a row and make sure that you guys are going to maintain that positivity, and you're going to still have the interest, and you're able to work that closely with someone all the time? Because when you're here, we all spend our lives here, to say the least. And if you can't spend your life with someone else, then you probably shouldn't work together. So it's really nice to have a company that really cares about who they hire. We take a lot of pride in the people that work here, and even if they aren't from another brewery or have 10 years of experience doing what they're applying for, if they vibe and they're good at just jumping in and being independent and growing with the brewery, then they'll probably get a job.
Well, speaking of jumping in, let's jump right into the beers here. On our podcast, we like to encourage our brewers to tell their brewery story through their beers. If Half Acre were to take over the taps at the Tap Takeover podcast, which of your many eclectic beers would you choose to tell that story?
I feel like the first beer that I would start with would probably be the first beer we ever did, which was lager. At the time, that beer told a lot about what was happening in craft beer / not happening in craft beer. At the time, macro, about 10 years ago, was everywhere.
It dominated.
Chicago was old style, and old style. I think it's really awesome that we tried to kick off our brewery with a lager, which I feel like taught us a lot to start. As a brewery, having a turnover of either 2 weeks or 5 weeks for brewing a beer makes a huge difference as a small brewer. So I think we realized right off the bat that we'd have to brew an ale. So I would maybe include over ale, but I think Daisy Cutter was really the next big step.
You'd have to. You'd have to include
Yeah.
Daisy Cutter for talking to Half Acre.
I hate leaving over ale out because that beer is amazing. Our stylist Wonder, which was a brown ale.
Do you guys still produce that lager? Is that still?
We have done it.
Okay.
Let's see, we made it last
We'll
year.
do it once a year at
yeah,
least.
just about once a
For
year.
the tap room.
So it's not really retired. It's just kind of in the bullpen.
Yeah, we call it a
Totally.
legacy beer.
Nice.
Ooh.
Right.
Yeah.
That's classy.
But then I would say Daisy Cutter, because at the time that was, people were looking for that beer you could smell 4 seats down at the bar, and which was a new thing. Like when Matt had his first bitter goose IPA. People they craved it. They wanted something with flavor and something that excited their palate. Getting Daisy Cutter to where it is today took a long time. I feel like development-wise, hops were at the will of our agriculture, and figuring that out was a huge process, and getting the recipe down and consistent and where we wanted it. And then the next beer I would choose would probably be Gone Away, formerly known as Sanita, formerly known as Hioka, just because I feel like that beer kind of put us back on the map. We were doing Daisy Cutter for a long time, and it was getting really hot, and we love Daisy Cutter, but we were looking for something with a little more just like pep in your step, a little more oomph. And when it got that silver at GABF, we felt it. As much as we try to take it with a grain of salt.
Get too wrapped up in
with
the
awards and stuff like that.
Like, you don't brew for the awards,
But when it happens,
sure
it's really
is-
exciting.
It sure is nice that little bit of
Validation of what you've been working so hard for all those 10, 12, 18 plus hour days.
Yeah.
exactly.
And then the last two, I'd have to say Gin Barrel Aged Pony, which I give all the credit
Nice.
to Matt, because that beer really shows our creativity and our ability to do more than hoppy beers and to play around with barrels and do something truly unique that pours out of a barrel. And then the last one, I might have to go with tuna because it's the best gosh darn beer that I've been drinking, and I can't stop. I can't stop.
Of tuna.
Speaking of tuna,
Was in my cup.
We should mention we're doing a live tasting as we do here on the Tap Takeover podcast. So tell us about this tuna. This is one of your brand new beers.
So it's 4.7%, and I just feel like the craft beer scene has gone kind of back to that approachable, you want to drink more than one beer. Pilsners are becoming more popular. So are really low ABV beers like this one that happens to have all of the qualities of the IPA, but without all of the alcohol that makes you fall on your face. So that might be why I like it, but I've just noticed the trend, at least in Chicago, that people are going back to more sessionable, drinkable beers.
So tell us about this beer specifically. Take us from the concept of the beer to the production of the beer to the marketing of the beer. How do you take that for one of these brand new beers that I'm sure we'll be seeing in Wisconsin before too long? Oh, yeah. Lead us along that path.
Oh, I think that we've probably been brewing this beer for a handful of years now. It used to be called Golden Tuna, and we would brew draft-only batches for the tap room and the shop. I actually don't know off the top of my head when the first year that we brewed it was. I don't know if you know, but it's probably been 3 years at least, I would say. And it was probably born out of just playing around with some of the newer hop varieties that were becoming available. So Mosaic was the one in this beer that is featured. It's Mosaic and Centennial hops, and just the desire to make a beer that was extremely drinkable, and like Kelly said, you don't have to have the alcohol component that comes along with a hoppy beer to have the hop impact and the level of flavor that makes it really enjoyable. So we just wanted to see if we could pull that off. Basically try to craft a beer that was deceivingly low alcohol while not tasting as watery as it could. Using some specialty malts to kind of boost the body of the beer, to make it drink a little bit bigger than you might expect it to be, and then just trying to figure out how to use the hops in the right ratios to have the aroma come through and just the right amount of bitterness where, it's not like a totally bracing IPA bitterness, but it's firm enough to just make it dry and drinkable and refreshing, but with enough substance there. So we played around with it. We brewed 3 or 4 different versions of it over the years, and it's just one of those things where a lot of these beers that we end up putting into cans, they just sort of organically happen that way. Not necessarily every single one, but I would say the majority of all of our beers that are production level in cans or it was organically decided by everybody that works at Half Acre that beer has got to be made on a larger scale because we all just can't stop talking about it. We all can't stop drinking it. You sort of like immediately know when you've brewed a beer that's going to become something more than just a one-off.
We're also really lucky to have the tap room, so we can tell based on numbers what's popular just, by the consumer. And when we sell 10 kegs of a beer in a week, it's a hit.
Oh shit, yeah. That's an shit
And then
moment.
we did a little test out in the market last year. We did a drop once a quarter. Pretty decent drop too, probably around like 60 kegs. They flew. We had a very small amount of people that could bring it in, and when those trailblazing map rooms, craft beer bars can sell a lot of that beer, then that people like it on top of just us. So. And
usually I feel like we line up pretty well with how things work out in the rest of the city, but
for the most part,
we're not like we're not setting up some sort of focus group to taste through our beers
the
and
tap
decide
room
what's
kind
good.
of acts as your focus group.
You got a focus group who pays for try your beer.
Right, exactly.
And where did the name come from? It's called Tuna for a couple lives.
I don't know.
Sure. I'll tell you what, as far as a marketing perspective, when did it go from Golden Tuna to just tuna?
Well, everyone kept ordering it as, can I have another tuna? Can I have another tuna? Beer names are hard. Trademarking is a huge part of the beer naming process. So after people just started calling it tuna all the time, we just dropped the Golden and trademarked the tuna. So now it's tuna.
I almost thought it had a Animal House, maybe a history to it or something like that.
No fish were harmed in the making of this beer.
So how many different lines of beer do you guys have in your catalog at the moment, including the legacy beers, including the stuff that you guys do regularly? Do you guys have a full number on that?
You guys do a ton of one-offs, too.
Yeah, we do
Constant
over
one-offs.
like 60 beers a year.
Yeah,
maybe more
easily.
at this point. We
Yep.
can.
Yeah. Our Lincoln location, we're pretty much exclusively brewing one-offs over there, and 2 or 3 beers a week we'll do that. Probably 2 of them are beers we've never done before. Over here, we can 4 or 5 different beers at any given time. Some of them are seasonal, and then we also have sort of a monthly specialty beer release calendar for beers that are brewed here at Balmoral that will go out for a little bit wider distribution footprint than just the shop or the tap room. So there's different layers of specialty-ness.
I'd say it's core, seasonal, specialty, tap room, and legacy beer. 5 different tiers of what we do.
Well, before we get too deep into our own questions, we kind of put it out there to our listeners, and the Tap Takeover posse responded with some great questions for you guys. So,
Hey, guys.
So Kelli Kozar from Madison, Wisconsin wanted to know, where does the name Half Acre come from? Why not a full acre?
Never heard that one before.
I could sort of tell it, but the brewery was started by this guy Gabriel, and he grew up in New Jersey, and there's a small town in Jersey near where he grew up. The name of the town was Devil's Half Acre, and there's sort of a side story to the history of the name for the town, but it was just a super small little area of land, and I think that he likened that idea to sort of having your own like sort of escape or small getaway. Everybody like has their own like half acre of escape in their mind somehow.
I like that small acreage, small batch, that kind of concept.
There was also, I'll just add to this, that patch of land prior to it being, I think it's a national park now. A gentleman wanted to open a bar. It was in between like 2 port cities. There was a bunch of gentlemen that wanted to drink, but it was like a dry area at the time. So I guess this guy incorporated the land. He bought it from someone, incorporated it, made himself mayor, gave himself a liquor license, put the only bar in the area. I guess a bunch of people would fight and die and kill each other, bury them underneath the bar. But I guess what I kind of got from it, and then Gabriel spent a ton of time there. This is also 1800s versus now.
Oh, okay.
Can't really do that now, but I feel like it kind of inspired him. It could have been done in the 70s, but I feel like kind of like what you were saying, like it's like your place to do your own thing, to like have this unique, do whatever you want, obviously abide by laws. That's a
Create your own
good
footprint,
thing.
sort of,
Yeah, just, be yourself.
This is from Vince Core from Milwaukee. Was it difficult to break into the Milwaukee market? Besides size of area, what are the main differences, challenges competing in both Milwaukee and Chicago?
It's a really great question. We are still pretty new up there, so I don't think we've really seen too much challenge yet. But I think the biggest thing that we care about is quality and making sure, we see the sales, but making sure that the beer is selling from the liquor store or the bar. And, keeping up with that is always a challenge, and making sure that beer stays fresh. Currently, we have a rep up there who works for our distributor, but calls on just our brand, which is pretty cool, at least in Milwaukee. So he keeps an eye on code dates and freshness and all the new beers that are coming out, and making sure that we get the proper placements at the liquor stores. So far, it hasn't really been a challenge because we've wanted to send beer there for a long time, and I think Milwaukee and Wisconsin itself has wanted us to be up there. So it's kind of a reciprocal. It's a reciprocal relationship. When we launched New York, it was a little bit more of a gray area because we didn't know as much about New York. But Wisconsin, we go to Great Taste every year. We love Milwaukee people. We're only an hour away, so I don't feel like we were as nervous about it. And Wisconsin can drink. So I feel pretty comfortable sending our beer up there, especially in the more urban areas.
Yeah, I think out of the 15 drunkest cities in America, I think Wisconsin had 5 of them.
Yeah, probably.
So we can drink. That's well established.
So with those code dates and your brand rep is taking care of the freshness freshness of the beer. What happens when a beer does reach that expiration date, if we can call it?
So we'll have our distributor either buy it back or swap it out with something fresh.
Okay.
Which is really awesome. I mean, it happens occasionally. If you launch at a new liquor store and they happen to put you at the bottom left corner, sometimes you just don't get that visual sales, you know? You don't have that traffic of someone walking by and looking at your beer because it's not at eye level. So, you know, occasionally from time to time it happens, unfortunately, but our distributor is really great up there. They don't worry about having to buy back product. We don't worry about that either. I mean, we don't really have to do it very often, but just knowing that we're going to have somebody keeping an eye on it and swapping out old stuff for new stuff makes me feel a lot more comfortable.
Our next question is from Matt Saletti, who's from Greendale, Wisconsin. He's also one of the managers at Three Cellars, which is a craft beer and wine store in Menominee Falls.
I know Gino.
Yep.
What up?
Gino's the owner. He would like to know, he said it doesn't specify anywhere in his look, but he's curious to know what the main hop varieties are for Daisy Cutter, Gone Away, and Navaja.
And we don't want you
Is
to
that
give
really
away
not on our
trade
website?
secrets. Yeah.
No, there's actually limited technical knowledge on the website.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't think there are any secrets to the the ingredients that we put into the beers. I will gladly lay it out there for you. So Daisy Cutter is there's a number of hops in Daisy Cutter. We work hard we go out to the Yakima Valley yearly and sort of select the new crop of hops and all that stuff, and things can ebb and flow a little bit to keep the overall flavor of the beer where we want it to be. But the predominant hops that are focused on in Daisy Cutter are Amarillo, Simcoe, Centennial, and Columbus. Always been that way.
Warrior for bittering.
Yep. I usually leave that one out.
I know.
'Cause it doesn't
It's
really
only about
come
this
through
much.
in the flavor or the aroma.
No, but
thanks, Kelly.
bittering, especially for an IPA, is important, right? You got to get those IBUs up.
Sure. Yeah. So we throw a lot of hops in the kettle. The Warrior edition goes in at the traditional bittering time that you would add hops for bittering, but we're also getting a majority of our bitterness from the later editions with those other hops that I just mentioned. So they're all sort of contributing in different ways to overall bitterness of the beer.
Yeah, so do you have a certain alpha acid percentage that you try to hit for each batch? And overall, how do you, as a production brewery, really maintain that sameness throughout each batch that you make?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really challenging to do that as a smaller craft brewery, but with the volume of beer that we're making, we feel like it's very important to try to stay as consistent as possible with the beers that we're putting in cans. So when we moved over to our new brewing facility here 2 years ago or so, we designed a lab into the facility so that we could sort of start to monitor some of these numbers. We did as good as we could in the past, try to add the same amount of the same hops, keeping an eye on some of the alpha acid levels in there, and basing most of it off of taste in the end, which we still do today. But now we're able to monitor, we can quantify IBUs and color and stuff like that in our packaged beer, just to make sure that we're staying as consistent as possible. So we never really had a target for those things until we had the tools to measure and see where we were, and then decide, okay, that must be our target. That's what the beer
well, it
is.
still sounds like if you need a QA tester, you can look me up. I'll fill in for you.
Yeah, we have a number of testers here in the brewery for sure.
So there were 2 other beers.
The Gone Away and the Navaja.
Can you tell us about
right.
the hop bills on those?
Yeah, the
two
hops
as well?
in Gone Away and Navaja. Yeah, the hops in Gone Away are Simcoe, Chinook, Falconer's Flight. Falconer's Flight is a blend of hops, so there's like 6 or 7 different varieties within that blend. And then Navaja is Mosaic hops, Simcoe, Citra,
CTZ.
and Columbus. Yeah.
CTZ?
CTZ, which Columbus is part of it's the C in the CTZ.
But just one follow-up on the hop question. You said you go out to Yakima every year. Mm-hmm. Do you guys buy up, pre-buy up stock portions of the hop fields?
Sort of, yeah. We'll have hop contracts so that we buy our hops through hop brokers, but then the brokers have to tell the farmers how much to plant of each variety. So, we'll make a contract ahead of time so the farmers know what to grow.
Typically about 4 years out, right?
Yeah, at least 3 years, if not longer.
I read an interesting article about how the prices per pound of hops has gone up significantly in the past 4 or 5 years, just because of the exponential amount of breweries that are opening right now.
Yeah, hops are constantly changing. There's a lot of fluctuation with in the hop market, it seems. So yeah, we try to, it's important to sign those contracts so that you can secure the hops that you need. You know that you've claimed them for when we're brewing Daisy Cutter 2 years from now. But there's a little give and take, a little balance that you have to strike so that you don't have all these hops contracted for a beer that suddenly 3 years down the road you're not even making anymore because everything happens so quickly in the brewery. Yeah, it's an interesting dance for sure. But it's a really cool process.
Great. So let's get into more of the technical aspect of Daisy Cutter. What are the malt bill that you use, as well as do you guys have a house strain or strains of yeast? Mm-hmm. When you're deciding on some of your bigger beers, like what are the decisions for the adjuncts that you put into it?
So Daisy Cutter is, if you've ever had a Daisy Cutter, you notice that, to me anyway, it has sort of a unique malt profile for a pale ale, for a hoppy pale ale, and that's because we don't have any caramel malt in Daisy Cutter, but what we use more of are bready and lightly roasted malts. So they add a sort of a unique breadiness to the malt complexity rather than a caramel sweetness or a toffee sweetness to the malt complexity. And then in terms of yeast, we just have one house ale strain and one house lager strain that we brew all of our beers with. All the ales are the same yeast, and then Pony Pilsner is our one lager that we maintain our lager yeast throughout the year. We experiment with other yeast strains at the Lincoln Avenue Brewery a lot, so we use a lot of strains over there for sure. And actually there are a couple specialty beers we brew here with an English strain, but for the most part our house ale strain is an American ale strain. What was the other part of it? Adjuncts or something?
Oh, I was just wondering when you do decide to brew with adjuncts.
Adjuncts meaning?
Vanilla beans or coca nibs.
Okay.
Basically anything that's not the Reinheitsgebot, right? Really?
Mango.
Yeah.
So mango, habaneros.
Oh gosh.
Others may
Never
choose.
brewed with habaneros.
And I
mangoes.
actually,
mangoes.
as a head brewer, you have a lot of influence, obviously, on what are the beers going to be made. How do you decide what beers you're going to brew next?
Well, we have an informal, but we're trying to make it a little more formalized sort of innovation / research and development operation going on here. So we now have an official special projects brewer, Lee. He's been working at Half Acre for almost as long as I have. He's done a lot of the different production roles, and now he's focused on experimentation entirely. And so a lot of these ideas will start out on a very small scale. Maybe he's pulling off a single keg of a beer and adding in a strange ingredient to it, and just to see what we get out of that. And then we'll build, how can we practically do this on a larger scale in from there. But yeah, it's exciting to finally have, rather than us just all running back and forth trying to do it in our spare time, now have someone committed to focusing on complete experimentation. And that includes with our clean barrel aging work that we're doing, which we're sitting right next to our stack of barrels here, and then our non-clean, our mixed culture wine barrel aging that we're doing over at our other facility.
All right, before we get into that, because that was very interesting, because we did talk about that over there, I want to talk about what goes outside of the bottle, about the labels. They're so unique. What is the process there? Is it a collaborative process, artists, and what are your favorites?
Well, we have one in-house graphic designer who is amazing. We force him to show up 9 to 5 every week, which artists absolutely love.
Is that unique amongst?
It varies. There are a lot of breweries that want to have different local artists create their labels, and there are some breweries that just find, like Salamoth has one person that does amazing artwork for them. And we found a guy who's just so versatile that it looks like some of our cans are made by different people or some of our bombers, but it's all him. I mean, from t-shirts to stickers to labels to trucks to the little things you don't even think about. The pin, the coaster, he does all of it. I would say my favorite, Big Hugs. Our Big Hugs has developed over the years, having the double labels. I've only actually seen that double label at one other brewery, which actually was just recently. I wonder if they had seen a Big Hugs label and got inspired from it, because I don't think it's a very normal thing. But having a great graphic designer on top of great beer, on top of great owners who hire great people, the synergy of it all just works out really well.
So we're going to get into the big hugs just after a little break here. But before we do, we wanted to know about the owl and the tentacles. What is the story behind that? It's a very unique label, and there has to be a story.
The squid owl.
Yeah, I feel like this squowl. I think it's mostly... So Phineas, our graphic designer, is awesome. Gabriel found him by this amazing World's Fair painting that he did that was an octopus elephant.
Yeah, is that the name of his actual design?
Yeah, Octofont.
Studio?
Okay.
So we knew that he liked to morph different animals and just, get as weird as he can. So I think Gabriel, our owner, who went to SAIC for design school, he went for photography and creative writing, but, he had a keen eye for design. So
multi-talented individual. I mean, I think he went to school for glass blowing to start off.
Colorado,
a man of many talents.
Totally. So I think when he saw Phineas's Octofont, it kind of inspired him. And then, the squid owl has developed over the years. He has a mugshot now, which he got in jail. There was a time where he was like kind of hippie, like free-flowing, Octofont, multicolored, and I think he's developed as we grow. I don't think there's really a story behind it, though. Is there?
I think Phineas just liked morphing animals together.
Yeah.
That was it.
I think this is a good time to take a break, refill our cups here, and
Get into our next tasting.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And we'll be back with some talk about the big hugs. We'll be talking about sales and marketing. We're going to get even deeper into this brewery than we already are. And we're loving it already.
Everywhere are excited.
We'll be right back.
So that's really cool that they have a artist full-time on staff, Phineas, who seems to be a really cool dude, as well as a full-time woodworker. I'm not aware of any brewery that has that as well. So let's take a look at the label. Can you try peeling it off, Alex?
Yeah, so it peels off right at the corner here, and it's a whole new label underneath, which I did not realize until the interview. So that is pretty cool stuff.
Again, like Jim says, great radio, but we'll have a picture of that on Instagram.
Yeah, well, let's describe it. So the 2017, the front label is basically, it's a cat breathing fire, hugging the White House to death, it looks like. People are running for their lives, the White House is on fire, monuments in the background looking on. It's pretty awesome. But then you pull back, and it's an even more colorful picture of what looks like a cat with green lasers coming out of its eyes. So, just a really cool, really imaginative artwork on all of these bottles. And that has been the case every single year that they've put out Big Hugs. And that's part of the fun of it.
And also, if you're a fan of us on social media, we will have every single Big Hugs label posted leading up to this episode. So if you haven't seen these posts, go back, give us a like on Facebook, check out our Instagram, scroll back through, and check out all the Big Hug labels.
And if you ever get a chance to visit their tap room down in on Lincoln in Chicago, they've got quite a bit of artwork in the tap room, and it's a very neat place to visit.
So let's talk about the beer itself. Let's put this bad boy on the taps and see what we get. So we're going straight to the source here. We're going for the regular Big Hugs, the Imperial Coffee Stout, and that black matter coffee is really coming through nicely on this one. When you don't have the vanilla to take away from it, the dark matter really shines. What do you guys think?
I agree 100%. It's like that additive of the vanilla. It just took away from it, oddly enough. And this is just, you get that real nice smoky.
Are you getting too much alcohol like you did with the vanilla?
No, and I don't know why, because it's the same ABV, and you think you would get a little sweeter with the vanilla, but that was way more boozy. And this is not, I'm not getting that boozy at all, actually.
I think the coffee flavor is very pronounced, and it's actually quite delicious.
Yeah.
Like the vanilla in the last one overpowered the coffee a bit. This one's right there, and I agree with Matt, the head brewer's interpretation that this is a very drinkable stout that can sneak up on you.
Yep.
Yeah, you don't get a lot of the big roasty notes. It's very smooth from start to finish. A lot of coffee flavor, but none of those big roasty notes, the kind of burnt ends. There's none of that in this beer.
Yeah, drinkable is a good way of describing it.
And speaking of drinkable, we'll actually be drinking this one with Matt and Kelli in the next portion of the interview. But before we get there, and before we crack open the bourbon barrel aged version of this, let's get to some beer news.
That's right.
Now for this episode's version of Beer News. In beer releases, Goose Island launches their new barrel aging program called the Cooper Project this month. The first release will be a bourbon barrel aged Scotch ale. The Cooper Project beers will have a limited availability in select states. Let's hope they come to Wisconsin. April 8th, Three Sheeps Brewing celebrates 5 years of brewing beer. They are having a huge party and a special bottle release. Paid Time Off is brewed with coffee, cocoa nibs, and vanilla. The party and bottle sales begin at 11 a.m. in Sheboygan at the brewery. April 3rd, Kansas City's Boulevard Brewing starts distributing in Wisconsin. Try their Tank 7 Farmhouse Ale, Bourbon Barrel Quad, or Unfiltered Wheat Beer, which are staple shelf beers. Be on the lookout for rare releases Rye on Rye on Rye, or Saison Brett, and seasonals Snow and Tell Oak Aged Scotch Ale, and Bob's 47 Oktoberfest. In brewery news, April 7th, Broken Brat Brewing, Milwaukee, opens their doors. They are quoted as saying, "We are obsessed with beer and baseball. These are the two things that get us up in the morning, besides friends and family." On April 14th, 414 Day, Pabst Brewery opens its doors and starts brewing again in Milwaukee. West Alien Brewery in West Dallas is very close to a proper opening. A date should be announced within a couple of weeks. In beer festival news, Saturday, April 30th is the Isthmus Cask Ale Fest in Madison, Wisconsin, a yearly tradition that features exclusive cask-conditioned ales from your favorite regional breweries. Also on Saturday, April 30th is the 8th annual Northwest Beer Fest in Chippewa Falls. Sample from over 150 varieties of craft beer from over 50 breweries. Once again, April 22nd will be Stein and Dine at the Wisconsin State Fair. Make sure you stop by the physics booth and visit with the Tap Takeover podcast. We will be tapping 3 special beers. One at 2:30 is 19 from Central Waters. At 3:15, the Petrichor, a Russian Imperial Stout aged over 2 years in Elijah Craig 12-year barrels. The third beer, which we will be sampling at 4, will be Big Hugs by Half Acre, which is also featured in this week's episode. So make sure you stop by the physics booth at Stein and Dine to see the Tap Takeover podcast crew, and make sure you mention your favorite episode and what you liked about it to get your special sample. Join the Tap Takeover posse. And this has been Beer News.
That's right. All right, thanks, Andy. Another awesome edition of Beer News. Let's get back to the tasting. Next one is Big Hugs, but this one's a little special. It's the barrel aged edition, and this one's very smooth. Definitely the booziness gone. The smell is intense.
Yeah, super huge bourbon nose bouquet coming off of this. I don't know what bourbon barrel they used, but it's a spectacular bourbon because it's really tasty.
Yeah, everything you think of the barrel aged beers, you definitely get here. You get that smell, you get the smooth taste, but I really want to kind of discuss with you guys, because this is a good example of what Matthew was saying. Don't age this beer, and I do agree this beer is great now, but I guess, what do you guys think? Should let this sit for a year? I mean, I
would disagree about 75%, just because
I don't know about all that. I would disagree.
Well, it's not like you said. It's not as viscous and as syrupy as a regular barrel aged stout would be. So I think a lot of that viscosity has to do with holding in the flavor profiles of the beer as well. This is quite light for a stout. I think a lot of that is going to fade away over an extended period of time. I'd probably leave this in my cellar maybe like 3 years max. Beyond that, I think the barrel might fade away more.
And the aftertaste, I guess you do get some booziness now that I'm having a couple sips from it.
I was actually kind of curious when you said that there was no booziness. Like, I'm getting a lot of booziness. Mostly it's the bourbon coming through. So you're getting that nice vanilla note and a little bit of oak. But yeah, there's definitely some booziness there.
No, I guess, my first couple of sips were very smooth. It was more based on the taste, but after a while you kind of let that sit, in the back of your throat. And it's like, what I'm trying to say is, as the journey, when you're drinking the beer, that last aftertaste is just, that's when you start getting that booziness. That's when you start feeling that, and you are getting booziness on. I think it's almost as much as the vanilla one.
This really takes me back to our first episode when we were doing the Black Fridays, the bourbon barrel aged Russian Imperial stouts from Lakefront Brewing. Some similarities, but I do feel like I kind of agree with Matt on this one. This one might be just ready to go. Some of those bourbon barrel aged Imperial stouts you want to put down. You want to lay those down. You want to see where the flavors develop. This one feels ready to go. Maybe I would lay this one down for a year. I do have another bottle, so I may just lay it down for a year, but I think this one's ready to go.
I agree with Alex. I think this is ready to drink right now. To me, it has a lot of the smoothness that an aged beer has. The bourbon flavor is really coming through. It's tasting really delicious. I think given the base beer that it's off of, you're not going to get much age in this.
So me and Andy are thinking we age this a little bit.
And I may agree with Jim on finding out what kind of bourbon barrels they age this in. You do get the bourbon a lot, but I'm not getting so many of the barrel notes as you'd normally get.
It's a very smooth drinking beer, and as Matt said, that's what he designed this to be.
Well, their goal, I guess, is to have a drinkable big beer.
I
I
think-
still would love to take an edge off this.
And it's 12%. I mean, it's 2% even bigger than the other Big Hugs, and it's not nearly as boozy as it should be.
And that's actually one of the really fun parts about the podcast, and this episode specifically, is this is a little bit of controversy for what we do. Our breweries here in Milwaukee are talking about this symbol that they're putting on the bottle, letting you know whether to age it or not. It clearly seems as though Matt would not put that symbol on this beer. And that's a little bit controversial because we talk about laying down beers and the importance of doing that with some of them, but it sounds like we're kind of split. You know, do what you will. I think Kelli in the next portion of this interview calls it a little bit of an experiment on her part, laying down beers and that kind of thing. And we actually brought a bottle of the regular Big Hugs down with us to Chicago just to try it with the master brewer and the sales associate Kelli with an eye. And let's see what Matt Young and Kelli think about the Big Hugs Coffee Imperial Stout.
Okay, and we're back, and we have a very special beer in front of us. It's the Big Hugs, and we always take this opportunity because we have you here, and I guess what should we be tasting when we try this?
Yeah, so overall, Big Hugs is, our goal with Big Hugs is to make a 10% alcohol coffee imperial stout that you could drink pint after pint of. Until, you reach your own personal limit and choose to stop drinking it. We wanted to avoid the like super thick, syrupy 10% sort of imperial stout and make it still so that you can enjoy a larger quantity of the beers. Yeah, so overall, the alcohol, I think we try to keep it pretty well hidden. The malts are very roast forward, and then the coffee sort of layers another bit of roast and chocolate and bitterness into that. So it's just a lot of coffee, a lot of roast, a lot of chocolate, but still pretty approachable, not super thick. Still can enjoy it in a social setting.
Well, cheers to enjoying in a social setting.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Do you guys know how this beer was kind of developed?
No,
That's
we
what
would
we want to know, yeah. Tell us.
we would love to know the story behind Big Hugs. Where did this come from?
Back in the day, so when we were first starting out as a pretty small brewery, our friends at Dark Matter were kind of in the same boat. A small local coffee shop trying to start roasting their own beans, get a little bit more. They wanted to do it themselves and get the highest quality beans they could get, source them themselves. And we feel like they were kind of doing with coffee what we were doing with beer. So how do we help each other? At the time, everyone was coming out with Doom Slayer and, like the biggest, most badass beers they could with the craziest metal names that they could. And, I feel like our owners and Dark Matter's owners are pretty modest, and they just like to drink beer and have a good time. So it kind of came out of this honest need for an imperial stout with a cat on the label, giving hugs to everybody. So kind of just going in the opposite direction of everyone else. That's kind of what we like to do. We want to make sure we're brewing the best beer that we can, but to help our own brewery and to help their coffee roastery kind of come together as this Chicago couple, and that's just kind of where it started. And it's just grown every year since.
Yeah, so the cool thing about the coffee part of this beer is that it's always been extremely collaborative effort with Dark Matter, rather than us, just buying Dark Matter roasted beans and doing the extraction ourselves. Dark Matter does the extraction with us and for us, and we work together on the variety and the type of roast, and we settle on all of the specifics ahead of time. And then historically, especially when we were brewing smaller batches of this beer, there would just be a huge party around the actual coffee extraction process. And,
it's a really good party.
And some of it was, it would, because it would take 12 hours sometimes to do all the extractions that we were trying to do, especially if we were, say, pulling espresso shots as the vast majority of the coffee that was going to go into the beer, or doing individual pour-overs as all the volume of coffee that was going to go into the beer. And so they would come to the brewery, set up shop, bring all their equipment, and just spend the whole day pulling shots or doing pour-overs and slowly collecting the coffee into half-barrel kegs so that we could add it into the beer. So it's a super super collaborative relationship that we have with them on this beer.
So you've got this great party for the coffee portion of it, and then you also have an amazing party for the actual release of the beer.
We like to party.
Half Acre likes to party. Pro tip from
get along.
Half Acre podcast. So Andy and I were actually there this year. We were there for the big party. I mean, you guys had a DJ in the rafters. You guys are handing out samples as you walk in the building. If you get a chance, I'm sure it'll be this coming December, probably early on.
Second Sunday every year.
Okay, second Sunday of December. You got to come check this out. It's the line starts very early, so you got to be ready. By the time we got there, about 3 hours before you guys opened, it was already
we were up in the alley.
It had already rounded the block, and then by the time you guys opened, it was completely down the block. It might have even stretched over 2 blocks. You got to get out there early, but it is totally worth it. Along with that, you're getting the big hugs, the coffee Imperial Stout, and then 3 different variations. Can you tell us about some of the variations and some of the thought that goes into those?
Yeah, this past year, 2 years ago, we did our first variation, and that was vanilla big hugs. So we decided to make a batch where we added vanilla beans into the beer along with the coffee. And then this past year, we took it a little bit further, and we offered up several different options of the beer. And we just kind of put our heads together and thought about different ways that we could riff on the beer a little bit without getting totally away from the coffee component of it. One of them was to age the beer in bourbon barrels. One was to do the vanilla batch again. And then we did a weird one where we added cocoa nibs, and then the coffee that was extracted was all espresso, and each shot of espresso had a pinch of salt in
pink Himalayan salt.
Yeah, pink Himalayan sea salt. So drinking the espresso was almost impossible because of the level of brine in the espresso. But when it went into the final beer, it just sort of had a subtle impact on the mouthfeel and just made you salivate almost a little bit to sort of smell and taste the beer. And you maybe wouldn't be able to identify it as, oh, that beer is salty right off the bat, but it changed the impression of it a little bit.
Yeah, the salted pretzel espresso, I think, is that one. It's actually my favorite this year. I think you guys did a really, really good job with that one.
That one was really fun to make. We actually had the 3 different coffee shops that Dark Matter has in Chicago. All 3 of the facilities were making the individual espresso shots at the same time. We did a live stream while we threw a party here. So it was really fun to just have everybody on board for a few hours, making these espresso shots together and then putting it all together, and just having that camaraderie with another business is really awesome. Just to share the beer with them and share our good times is, I don't know, that's what it's all about.
So as a fun, silly question, does somebody actually own that cat? Is it one cat? Do you guys do
I would say Phineas.
Do you guys do a cat search every year for the best cat for the label?
Our graphic designer loves cats.
Awesome.
Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, because every year you guys do a different banner. The
Different
cat's
scenario.
either fighting zombies or tearing down the White House. It's really fun. You guys really get kind of silly with it, and as beer consumers, we love that.
That's it. People were taking these Imperial Stouts so seriously, you forget that it's just beer.
You kind of give him a jab too, because you put that cat in semi-violent situations as well as hugging something.
He's giving hugs.
Yeah. He doesn't know his own strength. He just wants to give you a hug.
So for future reference for our listeners, how many variations did you do last year? Just so in case people from Milwaukee want to come down and stand in line with everybody else. How many tickets did you hand out for variations last year?
I don't think the ticket thing went so well,
I
but
can't remember. Yeah, I think
we probably did. It was a 15-barrel batch of each of them, right?
Yeah, I want to say somewhere between 50 and 100 cases of each
not
of
much.
the
So very
variants.
limited.
Yeah.
Not much.
And even that alone is quite an undertaking to produce, but it's a very limited amount. Sure.
So get here early next year, everybody.
Yes.
It's worth it. They're going to give you free coffee, food, and you get to sample everything before you buy it too.
And some other weird variations that we do in one-off kegs. We did a maple syrup version.
Was there a hazelnut one too?
Oh, yeah.
That was delicious.
Toasted hazelnuts, I think.
And that's the fun stuff. You won't get that ever again, really.
Yeah, that was
Unless you're there,
complete
so.
one-off. A legacy series, I guess so called.
The legacy
He
keg.
likes that.
All right, well, I want to actually jump back to the Lincoln location, and when we were there, we noticed the big tank with all the stickers. Give us the story there. We'll share the picture with our posse. So, yeah, if you got any story about how that kind of came to develop, it's really impressive.
Yeah, that tank is our hot water tank that we use for brewing. So it's got this big white plastic insulation wrapped around it, which is perfect for stickers sticking on. And I think it came from Ska Brewing when we bought that brew house from Ska out in Durango, Colorado. And it might have come pre-stickered to some small degree. I'm not totally sure on that. But then for a long time when we would have our tours, our weekly Saturday brewery tours, the cost of admission to the tour was to bring a sticker to put on the tank.
That's neat.
Now the tank is completely covered and stickers are covered over other stickers for layers deep.
There's also a picture of my mom on there, her school picture. So if you guys ever get the chance,
Oh,
look
man, I
for
wish I
Miss
would have
Playtek.
So we just wanted to talk about sales a little bit. Since Half Acre has a lot of quick moving, sought after limited releases, like your Double Daisy Cutter, the Galactic Double, obviously the Benthic and Big Hugs. I think Benthic was brewery only though. How do you guys determine distribution for those? Is it based solely off of movement of your staple beers in locations, or does anything else play into that?
There is a lot that goes into it. We have some really great accounts that have been loyal to us for a long time. Obviously, they're gonna get first dibs. You know, when someone's been pouring your beer every week for 6 years, you gotta show them the love. You know, during Big Hugs release, they'll usually get first dibs on a half barrel versus a 6 barrel. Then there's some really cool places that would love to keep a consistent handle, but they just only have 4 lines, so they like to rotate. But it's really fun to pour beer there when you can. So there's kind of give and take. We kind of call them our bread and butter. You know, the people that are just our good friends. They vibe well with us. They do what we want them to do with our beer. You know, they keep their lines clean. They understand branding is important. Adding the beer name to the menu helps sell the beer versus keeping it off the menu. There's just a lot that goes into deciding who gets what. A lot of it is based just on purely sales. So yeah, if you have the consistent line, you're probably going to sell more beer at the end of the year, and you'll probably get the specialty beers.
And I think sales would have more to do with the actual liquor stores and craft beer stores, correct, than they would the bars.
It goes up and down. I mean, every place is really important to us, and it just depends on what we're releasing. You know, we care just as much about our binnies and our indie off-prems because they do what they have to do to sell the beer, and they do it in a good way. That's really what I feel like beer sells better organically. You're going to put the beers that sell well on their shelves. If one doesn't, then they're going to remove it and be honest with you. And then if, you know, the beer starts selling better, they're going to get that extra case of Double Daisy Cutter.
A lot of these batches too are extremely small volume, and it would not make any sense to try to send it out beyond our brewery doors.
If you can't sell Daisy Cutter and Gone Away and Pony, then you probably shouldn't get Big Hugs. You know what I mean? Like, it's
You're
kind
not
of
worthy.
a give and take. We don't want any beer to sit and get old. So unfortunately, it's a tough conversation at times, but you know, then they move your beer to a more visible area, sales start to take off, and then they get those beers they want.
So do you guys do any self-distribution?
No, legally we cannot.
All right, so that's a law in Illinois that limits you completely out of any self-distribution.
Correct. You cannot self-distribute after producing over 7,500 barrels a year.
7,500, that's a pretty low number.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, well, I think we'll get back to that in a little bit, but one of the things we've had is, continuing on with Big Hugs, is cellarable beer. And most of your beers that you brew are meant to be drunk right away. You work really hard to keep your beer as fresh as possible. But can Big Hugs be cellared, and what other beers are you making that can be aged?
I would actually say that I would not recommend holding on to any of the beers that we make.
I would second that.
There may be some exceptions as we start to release some of the sour beers out of our sour beer project, but for the most part, beers that we're releasing them because we think they taste the way that we want them to taste when when we release them. If that means that Big Hugs needs to sit in a fermenter for an extra month to really round out and condition and come into its prime, then that's probably already happened before the beer is in your hands. It doesn't need to happen, in your basement, because we've already taken care of that part for you. I understand that people are always gonna have that thought, like, oh, I wonder if the flavors will develop or change in a good way. I want to buy a couple bottles, put one away, I'll drink one now and drink one later. And if you want to do that, go for it. But I personally would just recommend drinking it when we release it, because that's when we think it's at its best.
I'm really glad you mentioned the sour projects, because when we were at the Lincoln location, we were talking, we had to give big shout outs to Tom and Eric, because they were talking about Heavy Gem.
From the beer store.
And they were just amazing. They were so knowledgeable. I mean, we obviously did not have the recording devices there, but so we're going to repeat a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, and Tom gave us a little mini tour of the production facility over there. Great guys.
Cool. Yeah, but can you kind of tell us about Heavy Gem? It's just sounds so unique. It just sounds great.
Yeah, it's a marketing strategy that we have not come across before. The collaboration as an actual brewery kind of idea. It's very new. So if you guys could lead us through that.
Yeah, it's very heady.
Yeah, so we're all sitting down. Just tell us.
And I don't think that. Yeah, I think it's intentionally vague. I don't really have the answers even myself for what exactly Heavy Gem is, but basically it's just an ongoing collaborative brewing project between Half Acre and Tired Hands, where there are no rules, and the idea is to brew beers that are mostly going to go through our wine barrel cove that we have. So there'll be mixed fermentation, sour beers, and then Heavy Gem beers will be brewed at each location simultaneously and released simultaneously, so that the same beer is released at both locations.
But what I thought,
Half Acre and Tired Hands.
Yeah, what I thought was unique inherently, just because separate locations, they will be a little different. Correct? I mean, that's what kind of what Tom and Eric.
They're produced they're produced totally separately, so they're distinct batches of beer where we tried to follow the same recipe together as Heavy Gem Brewing Company. They were brewed in
different
both
water.
locations and
different brew house.
whatever variations might exist.
And then we also have to mention there was a sour, and then what was the other one?
Double IPA.
And that one will come in cans, and the other one will come in bottles, and that's how you'll do it. And there is no time. It could be in 2 years. It could be in a few. Yeah.
We've been working on this project for about 2 years now.
Yeah. And we just released the first beers from it. So.
Yeah. We thought it was going to get released last August, and it came out now. But beer's ready, especially when you're working with wild fermentation. Beer's ready when it's ready, especially with blending and everything. But I think it came about just because those guys are making really great beer, and they're at about the same time in their lifespan, maybe just like a year or two younger as we are. And I know that we can learn a lot from them, and I think they have a lot of things they can learn from us. So I think it's beneficial for both companies to continue to work together, as much as it's brand new. And we've kind of not really been in the dark on it, but we've known its existence. There's still so much more to it, and it's brand spanking new. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to just make whatever we want and not have to have the Half Acre logo on it, so we have this totally new body of beer that just allows us to not have that pressure of Half Acre. We got to keep the Daisy Cutter going, we got to keep the Gonaways, the Vallejos, and all this fun stuff, but working on a barrel project, it's something that we've always wanted to do, but for so long we just couldn't.
Well, one thing that I found really interesting about it, and you guys have done a number of collaborations over the years, but what Tom was describing, and maybe this is a different sort of collaboration, and maybe you guys can speak to that, but he was describing a process where you guys would do quality assurance on some of these barrels, where they would send you some of theirs, you would send them some of yours, and kind of test and figure out, are we at the same point in the brewing process on both of these, and which barrels need to get dumped, which ones do we need to keep? I mean, how much of that goes on during the collaboration process when you're doing it completely separately?
Yeah, I mean, for this first go of it, we sort of made our rough draft of the beer, which, making sour beer is a little bit different because you're working on a totally different, very long timeline. We blended our beer up after it was fermented and aged, and we shipped a bottle of our first draft out, and then they did the same, sent what they had to us. We sort of compared them, tasted them, see how, because I was just, I think we were all just very curious about how closely they were going to match up. So so many variables in place with something like that.
Especially with the sour.
Especially with the sour beer, that we were just curious, like how close are they going to be? Surprisingly, they were pretty close, and we were both really happy with each other's batch. Yeah, so that was just sort of the back and forth of it. And also, I will say that Heavy Gem is its own thing with zero constraints, but we're also doing these things as Half Acre as well. So that's another confusing layer to all this. But Half Acre is also producing sour beers, and it's not limited to a Heavy Gem project. We'll have our own distinct set of sour beer offerings that'll be coming up soon this year, and we also will be operating without constraints. So we just wanted to have this other project where there was a totally different set of no constraints versus our project with its own no constraints.
Yeah, no, you guys are right on the cutting edge, and it's fun to see you guys kind of figure it out as you go along.
Yeah, keep ourselves busy.
So do you think the sour that you're going to come out with is going to be that exception to the rule that one can be aged? Because inherently sours are known can be aged 20 years.
Yeah, it'll be, we will have held on to the beer to the point that we're ready for you to drink it. Already going to be 2 years in the making. So that's like 9 or 10 months of actual in the barrel time, conditioning, aging. Another 3 to 4 months in a blending tank where all the barrels have been married together. Everything stabilizes and conditions further. Then we bottle it, and then there's another 3 to 4 months of letting it condition in that bottle and making sure that we're happy with the final product, and then giving it a little longer time just to double check that we're cool with it before we release something like that. So all the checks have already been done. The beer is in great shape and we're ready for you guys to drink it when we decide to release it. And especially with a wild beer that's got all the microbes and bacteria that the bacteria and yeast that went into that are still in that bottle. I have no clue what's going to happen in the next 5 years of aging the bottle. So it might turn better, it might turn worse, who knows. All that we're sure of is that it's in good drinking condition when we decide to release it.
I would encourage, do whatever you want to do. It's your beer after you purchase it, but what we're saying when we release something is drink it now. It's better fresh, pretty much guaranteed, unless you get that perfect time, maybe 9 months after you release that beer. But you're also working with Big Hugs in particular, coffee. Do you want to drink old coffee? Coffee fades. It's not going to be present in a year versus like it is those first 2 weeks that we release it. I don't know. I would just encourage everyone to don't hoard beer.
Yeah, treat it as an experiment if you want, but you pay a pretty high dollar for some of these beers, and it's a shame when you find it in your closet 3 years later and it's totally past its prime. And you're like,
I mean, we've all done it, and I think
you
most
guys
of
are
us
really
are just
going to get us in trouble
experience.
right now.
It's going against everything we believe in.
It's kind of
this
fun
podcast.
sometimes if you get 4 bottles of Big Hugs. You drink one that night, you save one for a month from now, you save one from half a year from now. Fun, experiment, but don't bet it's gonna get better. Gotcha. I wouldn't, at least.
Not at all.
I'd say except for probably the barrel aged one. Maybe that one you're gonna get some extra qualities out of the barrel.
No.
It's not in a barrel anymore, so what else are you gonna get?
Pro tips from Big Hugs on
No, we
barrel
appreciate
aging.
that because that's one of the questions that always comes up.
Yeah.
How long do we age it? I mean, when does it turn bad?
mean-
and we've experimented with our own 4 or 5 years, 6. I think the last podcast was 7, 8 years for one of them. It was still good, but it's like when
Was
one
it
of
as
them,
good?
one of them after 4 years, I think we said, I think this one turned.
Yeah.
So
That's gonna happen a lot.
The cardboard, papery
Yeah.
flavor, the
can happen, yeah.
oxidation was definitely starting to come in.
So it's a gamble.
To play.
Definitely a
I mean,
gamble.
basically what you're doing when you age beers, you're asking for it to get oxidized, and certain beers maybe benefit from slight oxidation. It's a real crapshoot as to overdoing it, or if it's even going to improve the quality of the beer in any way. You're basically asking for the beer to degrade and then hoping that it's going to taste better through those processes before then suddenly it tastes really bad. Find some sweet spot in there that might or might not ever exist.
It's tough though, because I mean, even your variations on the Big Hugs, you guys do the wax dip, so it gives the person the impression that it's cellarable. It's going to keep some of that oxidation from happening. But you guys are saying just go ahead and just enjoy the hell out of that.
Yeah, totally. Life is
The
short.
wax
man.
is pretty.
The wax is pretty. That's what it is. Okay.
So I
Don't quote me on that.
Well, this is going to be quoted.
A couple of years ago, Half Acre ran into some legal issues regarding your 2 brew house facilities. Basically, you had 2 working breweries, but some regulatory statute prevented you from transporting and selling between the 2. What was the process like trying to get the law changed to accommodate your circumstances, and what other regulatory impediments has your brewery overcome over the years?
So at the time when we first got Balmoral and we started actually packaging beer here, we found out that legally we could not distribute beer from one location to the other, which has to do with the 3-tier system. You cannot exist in all 3 tiers. You cannot be a supplier, a
So you
distributor.
guys have a similar 3-tiered system that we do in Wisconsin?
Yes.
Okay.
Pretty much it's exactly the same. There's probably different laws and regulations, certain little things.
Well, you
here
guys
and
do
there.
have nano breweries in Chicago, which we don't have in Milwaukee. So there must be little variations in the law, but in its basic form, you guys do have the 3-tiered system.
Yes, but we could not exist within more than, I believe, one of those tiers. So at the time, there was a certain amount of barrelage, I believe, as a brewery that you can send to yourself. But we had already maxed that, so we weren't allowed to send beer to ourselves because we were already over that capacity. So I believe they got the capacity raised so you can send to yourself as long as you have less than 3 places.
Okay.
I believe. That's what I gathered, at least. So
You know what's
what we
weird?
could have done is sent it to our distributor and bought it back from ourselves and then sold it.
But you're losing all the efficiency.
But then we're
at that
losing,
point.
yeah.
You know
we're
what's
losing
weird is
everything.
like you're dealing with this, you guys work for the brewery, and you're still kind of like not sure what's going on.
Yeah, I mean,
That's what's amazing about this whole system in general. That we know a little bit about it, but every time we try to explain it or try to understand it, we're like, you know what? It's called 3-tier.
we can pull Gabriel
We
down.
have
He's the one that
experts here
actually
for-
worked with the guild to get the legality changed, which he's done before. We were the first brewery in Illinois to have a little store.
Retails.
So we had to create our own permits to get that because it was not a thing. You couldn't go to a place, try a beer, and then buy it without having a whole taproom permit. That's the cool part about having awesome owners who know a lot of really cool people. And, Gabriel was the secretary of the guild for a little while, I believe, when those regulations changed. But the biggest thing was we couldn't exist in 2 of the tiers. So we had to be a supplier. So it's supplier, distributor, retailer. So we, at that time, because we're sending it to ourselves, we were a supplier and distributor. What we did in turn was created a sprawler series, is what we called it. So we made a bunch of bombers on premise to sell instead of cans. And then all of our retailers around the brewery and everyone else got all of the cans. And we sold a buttload of beer that way and just took a little hit at our own place.
So you actually mentioned the bombers. Another thing that Tom and Eric said that you're phasing out bombers. Is that correct?
Yep.
So is that reason, or what is the reason for that?
Well, the quality of beer in our cans is higher than bombers. We can get less oxygen into the package in the can than the bomber, so the beer stays fresher and tastes better that way.
Additionally, bombers are kind of dead in the
Whoa.
market, at least in Chicago.
Breaking news.
Yeah, breaking news.
No, actually, we're seeing the same thing. The ones we've interviewed,
It
they're going
does-
towards cans.
it
just
does
because
take
of
a-
quality.
It
Just for
takes a lot
special.
to switch over that line from the cans to even 12-ounce bottles to bombers. It's a whole process. I mean,
Price point's better in cans.
when we talked to Russ Klisch at Lakefront, he talked about they really only do their Black Friday series in the bombers now because it is such a process to turn it over. So special release stuff, obviously you wanted those in bombers, but
Big Hugs will
everything
stay in
else.
bombers, but when we're making double daisy cutter, I mean, people want 64 ounces of that beer.
You're moving more liquid, right?
Yeah, and you can have one and bring 2 cans to your friend's house. I just think that at this point, at least in Chicago's market, bombers are slowly becoming less relevant. And, you have to keep up with what's going on in the beer craze, and people love new shiny cans.
We've been canning beer for longer than a lot of people in the area. We were just limited in not being able to, other than like experimenting a couple times, to to have unprinted cans that we would hand label, which is what we've been doing recently.
People just love having those 4-packs. Get your double daisy, you get your tuna, put 2 cans, you can have a little mixed 4-pack for your party, and then you still have some at home, versus when you bring the whole double daisy bomber to your friend's house, it's gone.
No, I think it benefits, consumer and you
Everybody.
guys, the quality, the price,
Yeah.
and no, it's great.
So one big focus of our podcast is cellaring beers, which we've already covered, and I understand that you
get
guys
an
are
F on that one?
you guys are against cellaring Half
Not
Acre
against.
beers. Well,
Fully.
not against. Yeah,
Just
you're right.
don't get mad at us when
fresh.
it doesn't taste good 2 years down the
No
line.
one should. If they're choosing to do
Yeah.
that, that's their
I guess-
prerogative.
So speaking of folks who do,
Yeah.
do you guys personally have beer cellars? Do you guys cellar anything? Do you have any whales in your cellars?
We're talking strictly personal.
Yeah, strictly personal. What do you guys get?
Marine
in?
mammals flopping around?
I have my
I
college
drive by Shed
refrigerator.
Aquarium in my Friday afternoons. Shush.
My college refrigerator has my baby cellar. I try to make sure, you can't keep more than 8 bottles in there. So whatever I put in, something has to come out.
Okay. So it's pretty exclusive.
Yeah.
Nice.
So there's some big hugs in there from a couple years ago. I'd like to also experiment. I just don't encourage people that pay money for those. I did not pay money for those. So, it's truly an experiment on that end. But, I still have a small animal, big machine in there, which was a Pipeworks collaboration that we did in
That was like 5 or 6 years
Chardonnay
ago.
barrel. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I still have one of those. I have iron brass that was barrel aged, but I don't encourage it still. Because every time I pop one open, I'm like, damn, this sucks.
Oh wow.
We're not talking just Half Acre, but any other beers.
My cellar consists of my fantasy football winnings from last season.
Yeah.
Slowly
Another
working
champion
through.
over here, buddy.
So we got 2 champions in the room.
Well,
Of course, this is the point where Jim puts himself over.
He doesn't want
I didn't lose any money.
Nice. So what did you win in your fantasy football league? Like,
Oh, it was just a hodgepodge of mostly higher alcohol stuff that, the buy-in was a fancy bottle of beer
nice.
for everyone.
So
That's neat.
what were a couple that you won?
There were a couple beers from the brewery, a couple beers from Firestone Walker, a couple from Toppling Goliath, I think. Yeah, so I instantly had a cellar.
That's a pretty good haul.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think on that note, we're gonna wrap this up. It looks like we're out of tuna, and that means that it's no more beer for us. So from Alex,
Andy?
And I'm Jim.
Jesus.
Matt?
Kelly,
that's gonna do it for us.
thank you so much.
So a huge thank you goes out to Matt and Kelly for sitting down with us for the interview, and also to Meredith from Half Acre who set this all in motion for us. The last variation of Big Hugs that we'll be trying tonight is the salted chocolate espresso variation of Big Hugs.
I got a question for you guys, actually. I thought we were going to end with the best one. Not saying it's terrible, but I'm not sensing what you guys have previously kind of described to me. I mean, what do you guys think there's a difference between what you guys had there to this? Because I don't taste what you...
I think that's a really interesting question, and I think this may be a case where Matt and Kelly's opinion of the aging process may be vindicated to a certain degree. When you use the adjuncts, when you're adding certain things to the beer, those flavors really do fall off quickly. When you're adding bourbon barrel aging, that kind of sticks with the beer. It soaks in, the beer takes on the bourbon character, the bourbon barrel takes on the beer character. There's a kind of commingling, but when you're actually just adding the adjunct, sometimes it does fall off. I will say that this does not taste as good as it did at the event. So at its freshest point, this tasted better than it does 3.5, almost 4 months later.
Can you describe, I guess, what do you think it tasted like before to now?
Okay, so what I can tell you about this beer that we just poured out into our sample glasses, the salt is almost non-existent right now.
No, see, I'm still picking up a little bit of salt, but it's much more subtle than it was. It popped, and it made the chocolate taste better when it was fresher.
I mean, for me, the chocolate's barely there on the back end, and I'm still getting a lot of the espresso. But what I can tell you is if you find this on tap somewhere, somewhere, it's obviously going to stay way fresher, carbonated in a barrel. Get it, because the explosion of flavor in your mouth will just be delicious. I mean, it's actually very, very good fresh.
Yeah, because I'm currently being underwhelmed by this. I'm getting some like salt on the back end after it kind of dries off in my mouth, but nothing on the front.
But it's not what
there's
what
some
you guys described.
chocolate.
Yeah.
There's no explosion. There's nothing. It's kind of meh right now.
It's a tale of two beers. It really is.
I would disagree with you on the meh. I still think it's a tasty beer. I think the espresso is a little bit different than the coffee that they use on the traditional Big Hugs. So I think that's adding a different sort of flavor. I also think that as it warms up, it's giving off a few different notes that it wasn't when it was a little colder. So, one thing that you can do, pro tip here from the Tap Takeover podcast, if your beer's been in the fridge for a little too long, what you can do is surround the cup with your hands and just kind of warm it up with your own body heat. And that'll bring some of those esters and some of those other flavors out of the beer. As this one warms up, I'm getting more of the espresso. I'm definitely getting more of the chocolate, but I'll stand by my earlier statement that when the salt flavor has fallen off, the pop that it gave the chocolate has also fallen off a bit. It's definitely not the same beer that we tasted at the Half Acre Big Hugs release event. I still think it's a tasty beer. If I had to pick a favorite, and let's go around the table here, I would say the barrel-aged version of the Big Hugs is far and away the best one. What do you guys think?
I'll go with barrel-aged as well out of the bomber. If I can get it on tap, which I have as recently as 3 to 4 weeks ago, I will go with the salted chocolate espresso.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely the barrel-aged. The bourbon was spectacular. This, I'm getting a lot more of the espresso coming through, but yeah, it's just not as tasty as the bourbon.
I also agree with you guys. It was that barrel-aged one, but I still think I would have aged it a little bit. I still think it was a little boozy, but the best one of the 4. But I want to follow up with this one, because this was one of the... We had 3 of the 4 bottles with wax in them. This last one that we had was one of them. Do you think that should have preserved the taste more than to the original, don't you think?
Well, as they said in the interview, wax is for decoration.
Yeah, the wax really doesn't do anything.
So does this prove... I guess that proves that they have that one, right, I guess?
Not necessarily. Wax does restrict some of the oxygen from leaving, so there is something to it. There's a degree of effectivity that it does meet, but I would say not always. And especially when you're dealing with adjuncts, it doesn't take a lot of oxidation. In fact, sometimes it doesn't take any for those adjuncts to just kind of dissolve, the flavors to just kind of dissolve.
Yeah, the wax should absolutely be doing nothing, because if it is, then you've got a issue with your bottling.
It's just something people have come to expect on rare limited release bombers. And if it's not there, they don't think it's good. It's all in the eye of the beholder. And if they're going to perceive value off of wax on a bottle, I'd be dipping everything in wax in it.
I think it is still a good experiment because it aged just that little bit, 4 months, 5 months, and the taste is so different. I just think it's interesting.
Definitely an interesting experiment.
Yeah.
Thank you again to Matt and Kelly for allowing us to spend time with you guys, to talk to us about the Big Hugs and all of the other beers that they have. I kind of wish we could have gotten into some of the hoppy ones. We're big hop lovers here on the Tap Takeover podcast, and they have some extremely hoppy beers. We cannot emphasize this enough. Get down to Chicago. If you're from Wisconsin, they've made a big blitz into Wisconsin. Go out, get their beers. Get a Daisy Cutter. Get a Navajo. Get a Tuna. Go down in early December. Get a Big Hugs. Check them out. It's definitely worth it.
And a big shout out to just the people that work there. We had great experience with Tom and Eric in the tasting room, and they were very knowledgeable, helped us out a lot, and yeah, it was a good crew. So.
The food in the tap room is delicious.
Yeah.
I mean, they got
The science nachos.
just different takes on burritos.
So yeah, get on out to the Lincoln location, check out Half Acre, and keep on listening to the Tap Takeover podcast. I believe that might be it for us, boys. I think we might have no more beer. So for me, for Alex,
Andy.
I'm Jim.
Jesus.
that'll do it for us. This has been a solid non-fail production.
He said there's no